Welcome back to the morning show, and thank you so much for staying with us. We begin conversations this morning in studio, and we speak with Mr. Bradon Roberts, and he is the president of Tutor Tobago as we speak to Back to School, September 2024. Good morning, Mr. Roberts, and welcome.
Good morning. It has been a while.
Yes, it has, and of course, we're talking about our children going back to school come Monday morning. A few things, of course, to note. Traffic on the road, and one of the main things that we usually speak about in the Tobago space is the preparedness of the schools to receive our children as they go back out to school. We know traditionally in Tobago, there's usually the school repair program that takes place during the July-August vacation and getting our schools ready for our students. And over the years, sometimes you would hear that this school can't open today, or the school has to, you have to wait a week, some other challenges that might have occurred. I don't know if you have any insight in terms of where we are in terms of getting our children into schools, the readiness of our schools, whether they had to be cleaned, painted, whatever repairs had to take place there. Do you have any information on this, and where do our children stand? Because we don't want parents turning up there Monday morning, of course, with their children all ready to go to school and only to be turned away because the school isn't ready. Do you have any reports on that?
Right. So first of all, we expect to get a report from the secretary. So I'm not certain if by Friday there would be an address to the teachers, to the parents, and so on, where we stand with school. The feedback I'm having, though, is that a number of schools, there was nothing, no works were done at a number of our schools. They would have done some work on, I believe, three of the secondary schools that had significant electrical issues. The report suggests that they are almost complete with those. But I am not seeing where the repair program this year would have had any significant work done. The concern, though, even if they haven't done work with the lighting and the plumbing and so on, the schools need to be cleaned. And we don't have reports of that neither. You see, I can't afford to be depressed, but it's depressing.
I understand, because
there's work to do, so I can't afford to be depressed. But we have been listening with the principals on the topic, and we trust that the division will do the needful by Friday.
I know one of the schools, that school, Signal Hill Government Primary School, in front of the school there seems to be a constant flow of water. They have blamed so many things on it. They've said that it was sewage. They said it's WASA. They said all types of things. I don't know if they came to a correct assessment and anything was put in place to stop that leak from happening there in front of the school. So that's probably something that you can also try to get some information on for us as we get the children back ready for back to school. Because of course the schools need to be cleaned. Some schools reported infestation of rodents and stuff like that. So we're hoping that everything is under control and we could get the children back to school in a safe environment that is conducive for learning. I want to talking about learning and getting the children in a space where they can, be relaxed in a learning environment. We just came out of receiving results for S.E.A. and C.X.C results here in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean for the C.X.C. And we're seeing there's a lot of talk in the social spaces. Of course, we saw where students in Guyana talking about 23 ones and all of these types of passes. But I want to focus here on the island of Tobago in terms of the results that came out. What is your assessment? Have you seen, outside of the reports that were given, have you seen any improvement in the types of results that come in for our students here in Trinidad and in Tobago, rather?
So the improvements will be based on which category of students you're looking at.
Let's start with S.E.A. Our S.E.A. students and their passes.
C.X.C or S.E.A?
S.E.A. Our S.E.A. Yes.
The S.E.A. in the primary school. To answer the question, I look at the purpose of schooling, and the purpose of schooling is to produce fitting citizens for our country. When you look at what is happening in our space, it's a poor reflection of our education system, because we have the crime rate which is increasing, the level of delinquency that we have of persons who have not attained any level passes and so on, and it starts definitely in the primary school. We have a tendency to focus on the students who would have done well, and we use that to have a benchmark as to where we are with education on the island, with primary school, S.E.A, C.X.C and so forth. But there's a large gap from those who would have done well to those who have not done well. And those are the persons who hurt us. So to see that there's an improvement, I cannot comfortably say that. We have a few students who are doing well. That has been the consistent case. We would have done better, I believe, this year in the S.E.A than last year. But that's not the benchmark for us. We have too many persons who are that 30% and below 30% and so on. So the programs for schools need to be developed. I've been clamoring for that for some time.
That's right. And I'm coming to that, thinking about what kind of recommendation should be made, because we're looking now at the traditional way that education is delivered in our schools. And clearly, it isn't reaching 100% of our students, because you're seeing people underperforming and people not able to apply themselves to the method of teaching and learning. And so, of course, recommendations must be made. What type of programs are you thinking should be implemented? And I know I saw the secretary is trying to make the curriculum Tobago centric. I'm not sure how that is going to be delivered in our schools and how it is going to be received. But what are your thoughts as the president of Tutor here in Tobago?
Right. So the direct relation with the poor performances has to do with discipline. So the way in which I'm sitting here and calm, a number of our students don't have that ready ability. They probably have either from home, they're allowed to be, however, probably in the environment that they're in, they don't have, and some of them are conditions, medical conditions, and it's ADHD or so, they're not able to just sit down and be calm in a classroom. So the students who are able to be settled in a classroom easily and be focused, they will do well. The students who have that parental support at home, the school, the teacher, the way in which they are doing the delivery, they will do well. However, the children who are struggling to just, excuse me, the students who are struggling to sit steady and focus on the work, those are the ones in the larger category who we are feeling. The suggestion would have been a number of these persons who are not doing so well are versed in the football. They may be versed in things in the community like fishing. There are different interests that we need to utilize in teaching these persons. However, the resources will be needed. So some schools try their best to do it on their own. You need the corporate sector. So if we are doing, let's say in Black Oak Primary School, we want to have a thematic approach where we are looking at the fishing industry. So in the maths and the vocabulary and the spelling, we use a thematic team where the fishing industry use some of the vocabulary words and so on. So the students have something to relate to. They could go on an outing where some of the things that we are learning in school, they could see how they apply to life. So it's not just a sit down in class, I give you work to learn, I give you some practice sums, and if you do it well, if you could remember the spelling words properly, then you're doing well. It cannot be just that, because there are some students who are not just settled in a classroom. So you would say those persons who are not settled as troublemakers and mischief makers, but they are intelligent in their own way.
That's right, and I want to agree with you, because I remember when I was in primary school many moons ago, the period that we used to have reading, for instance, I remember our teacher used to take us outside below a tree, and we would sit there and we would read. And the things on the outside will help to some of the children who would not be, as you say, be able to sit in a classroom and just focus on the board and the teacher writing on the board. When we went outside, you would see them asking questions. You would see them engaging. You would hear them asking miss, and they would be looking at cars passing by and forming conversations. And so, of course, that would encourage the learner, to participate, as you're rightfully saying, because it really is difficult. Everybody's not the same. And it really is difficult for all the children to be sitting, imagine 23 or 25 or even 30 children in one classroom and one teacher trying to get all of their attention and everybody paying attention to what is happening. So I want to agree, with you 100% in alternative ways of teaching.
Yeah, and you see, we are teaching students, and over the years we have been teaching content. So we teach the content, and who catch it, and that cannot suffice. So we need to be able to have the content catered towards the students. So if we have particular focus on goals, then we will know how this first year teacher needs to line up their curriculum with what the standard 3 and standard 4 coming up they were doing. If we don't do that and we have what is happening now, where each class level have their own curriculum, their syllabus, and when the child comes to my class, I teach that child based on what I have to teach, and we send them up. we are not going to have that direct link. There are some students who have great interest in the work, but because they have particular struggle in a particular class level, it's affecting them emotionally to the point where they are afraid to contribute. You know, they're not doing well. They having that habit of failing quite early when it's the curriculum not meeting their particular needs. And these children are bright children. Most of the troublemakers have great skills, but it's the way in which the content is coming across to them. It cannot be where we continue to just use textbooks and pull things from textbook. Have no relation to Tobago. Have no relation to the experiences of the students. And that's what we have been asking for. Some persons believe that teachers on their own could do it, but they would need the resources to make it a sustainable effort. And that's why we want the division to be a part of that.
And what about student support services? Because we're talking now about different types of children in a classroom. You mentioned those who can sit and focus and those who would get distracted easily. I know, for instance, there are some people, I heard a report from a parent, and she said that her son always has to have a fidget spinner in his hand. He would learn, but he has to have this in his hand. And the teacher would be like, you can't have that in the classroom. But that is what keeps him focused. Is there a relationship, like a good relationship with the student support services, to do assessments, for instance, of the children and to make recommendations in terms of how they can learn?
Well, yes, there is that relationship, but they are overwhelmed. So we don't have the requisite number of persons to deal with the number of schools and deal with the number of children, because you cannot label it by school, because one school may have 5, 6, 10, 15 students to deal with. So if a guidance officer or social worker has 2 or 3 schools instead of 2 or 3 children, the resources to treat with those students effectively, it's not there. So how effective it is, I cannot say it's effective at all. They would reach who they can reach, but the number of students who require their attention, we don't have the resources to treat with such.
And so, of course, now we have to revisit the way we deliver teaching to our children to ensure that they can get to a space that is, because you mentioned earlier, the troubled ones, well, what we call the troubled ones, are the ones who end up in situations like on the street, for instance, and we're trying to get rid of that. You know, because if a child feels neglected, for instance, you're focusing on the ones who bright, as we term them, and so you leave the ones who not so bright, because I mean that they keep them back your class, right? And so it causes, as you mentioned, emotional stress. So I really want to see that aggressive approach in terms of providing that measure of support for our children as they get ready to go into even to secondary schools, as they prepare for a life outside of school. Because when you finish school, what next? You know, if you don't have that measure of support, what next? And so now we're moving on to secondary schooling, right? The student has passed through primary school. They did the S.E.A. Some of them, they passed for their first choice. You know, the pressures of passing for your first choice. That's another thing where we need a measure of support as well. And they get into secondary school now. They meet a whole different sets of people. Some of their friends going to other schools, and now they're in secondary school. What type of, the same type of support do you think a child needs, especially one who are underperforming child, or a child who usually performs well, but how for some reason at the S.E.A. level they didn't perform their best, and they went to a school that they didn't select, or it wasn't their first choice, and now they're in this space, they have to go because that's what it is. Sometimes that transfer might not be readily available. How does that child integrate into the school system and continue to thrive? Because remember, in primary school, they were thriving, but it's just that, unfortunately, at this point in time, they were not able to. How does that child integrate into that school and come back up to the level that they are accustomed to performing?
So first of all, when I go to graduations at the primary school level, I speak to the parents. We have a tendency that when our children go to secondary school, we let them go because we believe, yes, we get them past S.E.A. and they're in big school now. That's the time when you need to hold them even closer. You need to know that they're teachers, because it's not like you have a particular class where the teacher could have all the understanding of this particular child, because that's the teacher for the entire day. They are going to different classrooms, and a teacher may come with them for a 40-minute period, and then they go to another classroom. So they will need that support. You are also going to have these students mixed with other students with their different upbringings and so on, who they may want to impress. So you may have a parent bringing up their child in the best way possible, and that same child may want to prove to another child that I could do bad things to you. You know, the illicit substances that they're sneaking into the schools, I could take part in that too. So if you don't take hold of your children and maintain that through the secondary school, you may have some surprises as a parent. Because you know, sometimes as parents we say, that's not my child. My child would never do that, but you don't know. because we believe they're in secondary school and we can let them go now because they're big and now they start to catch car for themselves. They causing endless trouble. Sometimes I think by Port Mall here they had an issue with some of the school students. So first of all, the parents need to continue and probably hold the students even closer. The teachers have been attempting, as you see the results of Signal Secondary School, the teachers have been attempting to have that kind of community where we could have a better understanding using the student support. There's a student council where you have a student body that you can have that layer between the students and the teachers where they can provide that information and that support where we could all work together. So sometimes the schools try to put things in place that they can properly monitor what is happening with the students. The academic content though, sometimes as parents we believe, well, I didn't do good in school so I can't help the child. It does not require you being good at the education. Sit with the child. So you probably read a book, any storybook, anything, at least be there with the child while the child doing a revision. If you are watching TV when the child is revising, it doesn't encourage the child to be constructive in doing any level of schoolwork. So as parents, you don't have to be a scholar to help your child. So those are some of the things we need to have parents doing. We need to have our children on a schedule. That is part of instilling discipline. Because discipline, we believe, is when you fight or if you don't fight, that is discipline. Discipline has to do with you having a responsibility and maintaining that. So you have your child on a schedule, what subjects you're going to revise on particular days and so on. Sometimes we wait until they are in Form 4 to have them in a study pattern, which I'm not certain how successful that will be. But we need to have close monitoring of our students. Sometimes we wait too late. So if we have academic challenges, you don't just send them evening class, and we believe in that. We need to have evening class for every subject area. And it may not be the case. And then you complain about the money you're spending in evening class. So if we monitor these schedules from first form coming up, and you don't wait until they get out of hand and try to pull it back by train money in evening class, I don't know that we're going to get the kind of inroads you need to get in education in Tobago.
And so you're seeing a holistic approach in developing the child, of course, some kind of structure in the home and in the school. And I like the idea of the student body in schools. And I hope that most schools can adopt that type of approach. And it also causes the children in the school to be involved in the activities and gives them a sense of responsibility and also ownership. Because now I am responsible, let's say, for the tourism club in the school, or I'm responsible for the pan club, or I'm responsible for the science club. And so the children have that responsibility and that ownership, and they feel a sense of pride. And you see, those are the children who really thrive because they really work hard. I know a student, for instance, I will tell you this, Bradon, involved in probably all the clubs in school. When I tell you all the clubs, and still able to balance the academics because that child has learned responsibility, time management, and all of these things coming up. And I really want to see that in our schools. I'm not saying to overwhelm the child, but to give them something that, of course, they can have that sense of responsibility for. And even at home with chores, parents need to give their children chores, right? Yes, so that they can have that sense of responsibility from early on.
And I would say most of the schools have those programs, but as parents, you need to ensure your child is in one.
That's right.
So even if they don't have a managerial position within that student body, at least they've been a part of it so that they could understand what roles and function, because some of those things mimic what we desire in the wider society. So have them be a part of the clubs and be active in school and not just attend.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Bradon Roberts. He is the president of Tutor Tobago. Of course, talking about getting ready for back to school and some of the things that we need to engage in as parents, teachers, all the stakeholders who are involved in bringing up this child. As you know, it takes a village to raise a child. So we want our village to be strong together as we produce children who will be, upstanding citizens in society later on. In closing, Bradon, is there anything else you want to share with our viewers this morning?
Well, we have to have a collaborative effort. I know that sometimes you want to blame the teachers, or you want to blame the parents, or you want to blame the division, you might want to blame tutor as well. But blaming each other won't help us solve the problem. We have been meeting with the division as often as possible. We work with our suggestions, our recommendations, our research items. The division, we understand they have their financial constraints and so on, but we cannot just continuously blame that. We need to have the corporate sector assist as best as possible. I know that the police officers have been talking about what initiatives they would want to have to improve with the discipline aspect of it. However, if we all pull at our own time, we will not be as successful as if we come together and have that structured approach to making that impact. So to have some optimism for this upcoming academic year, parents, you need to be vigilant, have a conversation with the teachers. The teachers, of course, would have to be patient in dealing with the parents and the students. And once we put our hands on deck and we work together, we will be able to make the inroads we need to make.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. Thank you so much, Bradon, for joining us this morning and sharing your views and opinions and, of course, making your recommendations for improvement in our school system here in Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to go for a short break before we continue conversations in studio this morning. And as we go for a break, of course, we invite you to help us. Share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.